Hey everyone, Brandon here with To The Top Roof and Exterior Cleaning. I know a lot of individuals are wondering how they can get started in paver sealing, and the first step is really making sure that you have that paver sealing bucket lid built for your business. It is an inexpensive way to really speed up that paver sealing process for yourself. So I'm going to walk you through how to get that done today. Check it out. All right, so let's start by walking you through the different parts that you're going to need, and I will link all of these items in the description below so you have easy access to them. First piece is obviously making sure that you have a bucket lid. You're going to need an adapter for your battery, and you're going to want to use something that will also have a voltage reducer attached to it as well. I'm actually going to be using a Ryobi battery, which is probably one of the more difficult ones to use, but you can use Milwaukee, Makita, DeWalt, whatever you want. I'll link all those different batteries in there for you guys as well. We have a 1 gallon per minute pump that we'll be attaching. You're going to need a few other just kind of miscellaneous items, which I'll cover as we start to build this out here. Obviously hose and wand, and then just all the attachments here. So I'll walk you through it. Let's get started. All right, so the first thing that you're going to need to do is make sure that you have a hole the size of your bulkhead that you're going to be attaching to the bucket lid. So I actually pre-drew that. I just literally took a pen, drew around that so that we can get that hole drilled out. You can use a drill, you can cut it out, you can do whatever you got to do. Some buckets may already have a pour where you can use that spot. This one unfortunately doesn't, so we're going to cut that open and start to get that moving. Now that I got that cut out, you can take your bulkhead and attach that piece right in here. So you want to make sure that you have one seal on the top right here. You're going to have another seal on the bottom right there. You can actually just screw that guy in. That's going to seal nice and tight. We're not going to lock it down too tight initially. We just want to get it set on there first and foremost. And then we'll put some attachments on it and then start to tighten it down here. But next, now that we have that in there, we're going to want to plan out how we're going to want the rest of this to look and make sure that we get everything situated where we want it. Now next, we want to make sure that we have a spot for our Ryobi adapter. Now, if you're using any other battery type besides Ryobi, it's going to be way easier for you. But basically what we have to do is we have to undo those 3 screws inside of the Ryobi adapter. And then once those are removed, what we can do is we can actually pull out these connections right here. That's going to allow us to trace around it and actually cut a hole through so that way we can line that up. We can make sure that that's going to be level with the bucket right there. And then we're going to have to drill some holes so that we can actually run those cables back through the bottom there to reattach everything. All right, so now we got that cut out. So this Ryobi adapter is going to fit in there nice and snug. So that's going to work perfectly. So now we just need to cut a hole so that we can attach those cables right in there and put the volume or the voltage reducer on the side right here. All right, so we got the Ryobi battery adapter installed, and essentially what I did is I just notched out a spot right here for those cables to run so that it keeps it nice and tight. So if you can trace that and get that on there without removing this piece, then that's even better. I like to get it nice and tight, which is why I pulled that off and then I put it back on. So now that that's in there, we're going to be able to install this guy on here as well. We're gonna have to grab some screws just to make sure that we screw this all down, make sure that it's nice and tight. And then these wires right here are what's gonna be attaches to our 1 gallon per minute pump to get that sealant flowing. All right, so we got those attached, and I just used some 3/4 inch wood screws to get those locked in there. You'll see those will stick through the bottom. You can do a different setup if you'd like, but I find that locks it down pretty well. So now what we're going to want to do is we're going to look at really building out the bottom portion of the lid here before we attach that pump. It's going to make it a little bit easier. So we're going to need to use our 90-degree angle here on the top. We're going to use a straight angle on the bottom with the barbs for attaching the different hoses, and we'll start to get that all lined up next.
So one important thing to note is you want to make sure that you wrap both the 90-degree and the straight barb with Teflon tape. So you want to make sure that you do that in a clockwise motion so that way when you tighten those down, there's a good seal that's created and it doesn't unravel when you do so. This 90-degree is going to go on the top, and then the straight barb is going to go on the bottom. So now these two are attached. With the 90-degree, what I recommend is leave that one a little bit loose here, so then that way you can still move it around and maneuver it and make sure that it's pointing correctly as you put that pump on and get that installed. The bottom piece, you want to make sure that that's obviously tightened down nice and tight. And then once that's in there, really the next step is going to be measuring out our hose. So we have our 3/8 inch hose here that we're going to measure out, make sure that it's the right length for the bucket. And then we're also going to take our PVC pipe, because that's actually going to go around this just to make sure that that sits nice and straight on there and keeps that weighted down towards the bottom of the bucket. We're going to cut that PVC pipe at about like 6 inches so that way this is going to be facing downward. We'll put a zip tie on the end just to make sure that that doesn't slip off the bottom once it's on there. And I recommend cutting some slits. This is a big tip that I've seen online is cutting some slits on this guy at the bottom, which I'll show you guys once I've done it, so that way it doesn't create a suction effect and just sit on the bottom of the bucket. Creating those slits will allow that to really move freely and just suck up that sealant really well. All right, so we got our hose cut. It's about 13 inches long, and then you'll see that we got these little notches that we took out of it here, so that way it doesn't sit flat and create that suction effect on the bottom of the bucket. And then put this little zip tie around this here. We have about 13 inches of tube and then about 6 inches of the PVC here, so that way it'll stay on there and it'll weight it down so that when it's in the bucket, it'll stay straight forward and flat the way that we're looking for. So now we can attach this guy here to our barb and get that set up. All right, so now we got our hose attached and clamped down. So now we can start working on the top part of the bucket here and getting that pump attached. So I'm going to end up screwing this pump on right in this position here. So then we have a straight shot from the 90-degree into the pump and then going out. And then we can connect our cables right here as well. And I'll show you what we're going to do to make that nice and clean as well here. So our pump is attached, just attach the two same screws here on the opposite corners here. And then I wanted to pause here so that you guys could see how we're connecting these wires. And you can do this in a multitude of ways. You're probably going to need to strip back the wire just a little bit to get a really clean connection here. But what you'll see here is that you can actually use this pack here that I'm going to include in the link for it in the description here. These guys are really, really nice. You can actually use these to basically, seal and solder together the two wires really easily. You can just use this red one right here for this connection, and it makes it really clean. It gives it a really solid connection as well. You just need to use, a heat gun or, a really warm, hair dryer essentially if you need to get those connected. But once they're connected, they look really good, and it's really solid, and it's sealed real nicely as well. So I'm going to connect the other one here, and we're going to keep moving. So now both of our connections are nice and tight here to the pump, and I tightened down that 90-degree angle right there, so we have a nice little short span. We're going to now connect our hose from this guy to the pump, and then we will obviously have to lock those down and make sure that they're nice and tight. And from there, then we can start to work on attaching our spray hose. All right, so now our hose is attached from the 90 all the way to the pump. So our lid is complete. Really the last piece is making sure that we connect up our hose and our wand, and then we'll give it a test run and we should be good to go. All right, so we got everything finished up now. And one thing you will notice is I did move these cables over here to the side just so that it wasn't interfering with the battery itself as it was clicking in there. So if you are using a Ryobi, that is something to be cognizant of. But the last piece was really just making sure that we had this 3/8 inch hose. We have our two clamps here clamping down, and then we have our male nipple connected here. Remember, this is a air hose. This isn't a normal pressure washing connection, so that is a little bit different than the air hose. And then same thing here for our wand. We had to connect this guy as well with the other end, so that way when we connect our air hose, we can snap this guy on the end and then obviously connect to the male end at the bucket as well. But after that, you're all set, you're ready to go, and your bucket's gonna be ready to rock. One last thing to note is whenever you're attaching metal to metal, do make sure that you are using the Teflon tape, wrapping that clockwise on there so that you get a secure connection, you don't get the leaks. but this will be a full build for you to run your paver sealing business, get it off and running. And this is something that when you're ordering these parts, the nice thing is a lot of them are going to come in multiples. So you could go to Home Depot and you could pick up these parts independently. They'll cost about the same, sometimes even more, than if you just order them through the links that I'm providing below. But when you order them through the links provided below, not only are you going to probably save a little bit of money, but it also is going to give you multiples. So if you want to build out multiples of these buckets, you'll have that ability to do so as well. If you are continuing to expand your business, you want to have different lids at different times. So I'll attach everything in the description below. If you have any comments, questions, definitely feel free to reach out. Love to help you guys out with this, but really excited for you to get started on your paver sealing journey.